Right, hello ladies and gents, welcome to this tutorial on how to do a mid-side recording mixdown in Logic Pro X. So here I'm just open Logic. Here you can set the number of tracks you want to use. I'm going to choose 2 because I recorded 2 parts, which I'll explain in a moment. Let's bring those parts in now. So here I've got one part of the recording which was recorded on a C1000 small diaphragm condenser microphone, cardioid pattern pointing straight at the center of the performance, and the second recording was from a C414 wide diaphragm condenser microphone set with a figure of 8 polar pattern directly beneath the C1000, sideways on to pick up the left and right of the room. So let's see what we've got now.
So when you're ready.
Okay, it's just noise at the beginning. Lovely, okay. 2 mono tracks. I'm going to use the Smart Snap and just drag the starts. It's fairly intelligent, this Smart Snap. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit to make sure that I haven't clipped anything off that I shouldn't have done. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so here we've got 2 mono tracks recorded by 2 different microphones. I need to turn this into stereo. So I'm going to use the figure 8 pattern to create my stereo. So to do that I need to duplicate the track. And Logic has a wonderful duplicate function which takes all the settings across. Just copy the waveform and place it in the new track. Alright, going to label that C414 right, and this one C414 left. If I were to pan that to the left and that's the right, well surely I'd have stereo then, wouldn't I? Well, no, I haven't yet, actually. All I've done is taken exactly the same signal, put one on the left, one on the right. I've still got mono. What makes stereo is the fact that we hear things from 2 different vantages. We've got a left and a right ear, and we hear things slightly differently. That's what gives us the stereo. And the way stereo is created in production is to create a different vantage from left to right, and we do that by turning a waveform completely upside down. It's called reversing the polarity. It makes all the negative energy positive, all the positive energy negative. To us it will sound exactly the same, it's just the polar opposite, and it's that gives you the stereo spread. So in Logic we haven't actually got a phase reverse or a reverse polarity button, which I find a bit odd actually, but you can do it by plugging in the gain insert. So I'm going to go to the inspector and plug in my gain insert. I'm going to keep it as mono because at the moment it's 2 mono tracks. I just want to invert the phase, well, strictly speaking is inverting the polarity on one of the tracks. I've done that on the right hand track, and this should now give us the stereo spread. So it's in mono, and there it is in stereo. Distinctly different. Well underway. I've now got a stereo mix from the 2 sides of the figure of 8 recording there, plus the center, and I'm going to improve this further. First of all, just a little thing about reversing the phase. You've got to get this right, because the thing about waveforms when they turn upside down is that they actually cancel each other out. So if I were to put these back in the center again, you'll find that all the positive energy cancels out the negative, and all the negative cancels out the positive. You actually end up with silence. So let's mute the center there. There we go. Can't hear either of them. You can see the waveforms playing. As soon as you push one off to the side, there you go, you can hear it. Excellent technique for stripping acapellas out of records. Worth a shot. Right, I'm going to improve this further. I want to be able to control the amount of stereo, and that's controlled by the amount of level from the C414 mic. I could raise these two levels here up and down, could even lock them together, but I'm going to create myself an additional bus which will give me control over that. So because I want to control the entire output from each of these channels, I'm going to go to the output section on the mixing desk and create a new bus. I'm going to send the other one to the same bus number 1 as well. Let's rename it C414 stereo mix. Obviously call it anything that suits you, and it will mean now that I can control how much stereo is actually in the mix. I quite like pretty much the full thing, so I'm going to leave it there for now. Right, so there's a few more things I can do to actually improve this further. First, we're going to look at some EQing. It's a fairly flat response recording, it's fairly true to form, but the problem with some of the frequencies, like bass frequencies in particular, in stereo, is that you get phasing issues and it starts to sound flat and lifeless. So rule of thumb is to not have any stereo on bass instruments or bass frequencies. There's no bass instrument as such in this recording. It's not like we've got a bass guitar or a double bass or anything, but there are still some bass frequencies, so to make sure they're not phasing, I'm going to apply an EQ to the stereo channel there, and I'm going to use a high pass filter. Allows the high frequencies to pass through and cuts out the low frequencies. It's cut out, I don't know, perhaps everything below roughly 160 or so. Let's just mute channel 1 so you can hear the difference. I'm going to thin it out slightly more. Okay, the reason why I've done that is that we've got the bass still in the center mic. It just means that I'm avoiding any kind of phasing issues from the bass there. You don't want bass in stereo in any production you're making. But I'm also going to lop a little bit off the top end as well, very, very small amount. And I'll explain why I'm doing that later on when I come to it. Next thing I'm going to do is look at a little bit of dynamic processing to bring some of the peaks under control. I'm going to leave the stereo mix alone and just use the volume on that. But for the main center of the mix, I'm going to bring it under control with a compressor. For that, I'm going to just use an insert. I'm going to plug a compressor directly in to channel number 1. Just going to solo this channel so we hear this by itself. Right, I don't know if you can see side by side here, but these numbers here, 0.0 is the position of the fader, but next to it says -14 in green. That means that so far the signal's peaked at 14 decibels below the point of distortion, which is fine, lots and lots of headroom. So this compressor's not going to work unless I have the threshold below -14. It's on -20 now. That's going to be very subtle. Let's push it down to -30. Ratios how much compression you're adding, and so let's see if we can get some gain reduction here and push some of those spiky peaks down. So what I've done there is I switched all the automatic stuff off as well. I like to make my own settings. You shouldn't really use presets on compressors because every situation is unique. So let's try that again. So what's happening? It's sounding quieter, but actually all that's happening is the loudest frequencies are quieter. Anything below -30 is still at the same level. And overall though, it has dropped the signal to be perceived at now -18, so we can push that up by a few decibels to make up for the gain loss. It was quite low anyway. We could afford to have it up, close up to -10. So Yeah, that's good. It's a bit more gentle on the old spikes there. Attack is worth looking at. That's pretty good. Always, for this kind of thing, always leave a little bit of attack, which is slows down the speed of the way the compressor switches on, and it means that some of the puffs and nuances of the way the note is delivered comes through before it gets compressed. It's just the tone then you get compressed. And release, I like a quick release wherever I can, because it means the compressor recovers in time for the next event. But if you have quite a quick release, you can end up with a bit of a pulse or throbbing comes through the mix, particularly with dance music. So watch out for that. That will do for now. So let's get rid of that. So let's put this all back in the mix, see what it sounds like. So it's all a lot cleaner. But you may have noticed it's very dry. This is recorded in quite a dry environment. It was a theatre, but not a lot of reverb. So I'm going to make it sound more like a vibrant performance in some kind of concert hall which got lots of reverb in it. So for that, I'm going to create a reverb channel and send signal to it. So to do that, I'm going to take the stereo mix, because I'm going to only put reverb really with the stereo, and go to the sends, click on the arrow down and create another new bus. I'm going to call that reverb. You don't really want to put reverb on the mono sound, because you don't want reverb on bass, because once again you'll end up with phasing problems. Now in the reverb channel, let's plug a reverb unit in. They're all pretty good in Logic, as you would expect. And with reverb, use the presets and fiddle around from there. So I'm going to look and see what choice I've got. Well, I want either a chamber or a hall, probably, actually. Let's have a look. Concert hall, piano concert, vintage concert hall. There we are. Let's try that. And there are parameters you can play with that will change the kind of size and decay and everything of your reverb. Play away, you can't do any harm. But the only thing you need to be aware of, and it seems to be set correctly, is these two parameters here, dry and wet. Because we're using a send, it's like an auxiliary channel, we don't want any dry signal mixed in there, so make sure that's at 0. The wet is referring to 100% reverb signal. There's no original signal in there, it's all got reverb on it. Because the balance between wet and dry for us is going to come from this control here, which is the send. Because there's dry signal, there's wet signal, and we can balance it out. So I deliberately put it on quite extreme so you could hear it there. It was also way too much. I've turned it down a bit now. Even now it might be too much. Let's just mute out the center. Right, all sounding a lot more natural now. I'm very happy with that. Just incidentally, remember I said before I was going to take a little bit off the top of the EQ? Well, that was because of the reverb. Generally, when the human ear hears reverb, you don't hear the lowest frequencies, you don't hear the top frequencies. So there's no point burdening the reverb unit with those frequencies. Firstly, we don't want the stereo spread on the bass, and there's no point having loads of hiss and sibilance and all the top end reverberating around. It'll make it sound nasty. So this is going to be a lot more natural now. I've knocked a little bit of top end off it. Right, lastly, I'm happy with the sound, but we need to also check the mix. And I do this by using my ears, obviously, for the balance. I'm happy with the balance, but also my eyes, and see what data we've got on the mixing desk. So on my master, it says it's peaking at -8 at the moment. That means that the loudest point of this piece of music is 8 decibels below the point of distortion. It gives me 8 decibels of headroom, which is lots and lots of headroom for the mastering engineer should I choose to send it off to be mastered. Generally they ask for 6 decibels of headroom, but you can go up to 10 or 8 decibels of headroom. Is absolutely perfect. So there we are. I'm happy with my mix. Obviously I would check the whole thing through for discrepancies, but I'm going to keep this video short. All I need to do now is export and send it to my mastering engineer. Thanks for watching.